Hello. I'm just gonna be doing this to practice some speaking, but also to go over some subjects that I think really are impacting everybody, and that I guess I want to speak about myself, um, just to articulate thoughts and come to conclusions or, reiterate things to myself, but also because I think I get a lot of listening to people do that sometimes. I think giving people a media to relate to um, can be really helpful. Um, I guess to start, I wanted to make it test myself to speak, but I also wrote down five things. All I was going to give myself was five things. Sorry, that's my dog making a bunch of noise, scratching herself in a chair. Um, so the first thing I wrote down was jobs. Um, the job market is not good for really anyone. Um, I mean, the economy is so focused around AI, data centers, construction, right now that there or healthcare. If you don't own a multinational tech conglomerate or a nursing home, you're really on the rough side of the economy. Or if you're not working in either of those in terms of finding a job. Um, but generally there seems to be a decline, and it's not due to anything beyond really tightening factors. I really people like to say AI. I think kind of. I don't think we're really seeing an impact from AI yet in the job market. I think there's a 60 Minutes bit going over robots being used in a Hyundai factory, and Amazon has this plan to um, basically double their company size without hiring anyone in the next 10 years. So like there's things like that, but it I don't think it'll be coming for white collar jobs as much as people say it will be. Um, I think it'll first go after what was it Jensen Wong said or somebody else, that they'll be going after the grueling, the dangerous, and the backbreaking. That's their goal, is to seal up those job markets. But for me myself, I'm trying to get a job in Boston. It's a region of the country I've always wanted to live in. I've really I've it's the place I've felt most home in. Um, so I want to go up there. But for example, if you're a young professional or a young college graduate, unless you have a hyper specialized degree with a lot of experience already, or you're an advanced student, or you have some sort of other experience that would allow you to break in, job growth in Massachusetts has been negative in the private sector. So and that's one of four states so far this year so far. We're only 3 months into this year, um, that's having that. There's other states where it's basically flat. It's also a trend that is really kind of more common in blue states right now than red states. Part of that's due to cost of living, regulation, taxes. It's easier for a more cohesive economy to form in, say, a state like Tennessee. Low overhead, low cost of living. So in terms of salary, you don't have to worry as much about higher taxes and business regulations surrounding that, which has its ups and downs. There are some good business regulations, but I think it's fair to say that Massachusetts would technically be in that overregulated part, compared to a European country. I mean, European countries are extremely overregulated. Um, and that gets me to my next point that I had written down here, and that's the cost of living crisis. And I think the worst thing is that it just suffocates people. Um, you're really running to stand still. You're going as hard as you can just to stand still. Um, I think when people talk about how angry they are, how neurotic they are, how anal they are over their own careers now. Um, I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that there's really less room on the margins to enjoy life, to do things that might be counterproductive. Um, I mean, you look at just how far salary goes. I mean, basically, houses have multiple times over increased their value, while salary basically hasn't changed in the last 30 years. Um, you know, uh, Cost of education. You used to be able to work in the summer or work a part-time job, and that would be able to pay, enough tuition, in tuition costs for the upcoming semester. Um, Buying a car, buying a used car, buying a new car. These things take up a greater percentage of your salary nowadays, and that really eats into people because it means it takes longer to save up for those goals, but also it means some of those goals might be out of reach. More and more people are out of the housing market. They're forced into renting. And I'm not gonna get on some drum and say, or get on some soapbox and say that home ownership is, the most important tenet of someone's life. Sweden would be a good, antithesis to that. Um, but home ownership is a way to accumulate wealth. It's basically a forced savings account, but also it's part of your retirement. So like we have more homeless seniors now than we have. Well, not more. I believe it's a comparable rate at least. But to the Great Depression, you know, when home ownership was low or times were very tough. Yet we don't have a recession. There's nobody's saying, you know, oh, 2026, it's the great stock market crash. There's no Black Friday or Black Thursday or anything. Um, so it's really, it prevents people from advancing. It prevents people from moving out of their house. It prevents people from getting a higher education because it costs more. Or their housing and living cost more for them to be able to take time off to go to school. It's harder for retirees. If you don't own your home, you're really in the mud. You kind of have to move elsewhere, or you have to make do with what you have. That also means you have less money to go to healthcare. You have less money to go to leisure activities or things of that sort. Um, and I guess that kind of bleeds into my next one, my third one written down here. Let's see if I can wrap this up in 15 minutes. Let's see if I can do that. Which is everything is politics nowadays. Um, which, while true, I think there's almost been a commodification of politics into everything. It's really been crowbarred. It's all you see on social media. Everything is somehow political commentary. Everything has some deeper political meaning. Um, and while that can be true, I mean, you can look into anything deep enough and find some substance to run with. Um, I think when you take a philosophy of pathologizing every little thing in your life, it actually doesn't explain as much as you'd like it to, because then there's going to be a lot of things that might be contrary to each other, or that might be futile, and you spend a lot of time, losing time, headspace, and blood over it. Um, but also, you just realize that there's not as much. You then would get to a point where you're trying to pathologize and work out every little bad thing that happens to you, or every little bad thing that's going on in society currently, and you try to make these big philosophical arguments, and you almost try to regulate things through law, but you can't do that. It's annoying, but it's true. Like I think there's been a big debate in the EU over hate speech, and how that encroaches on freedom of speech. Now, before you jump on me, I'd recommend you look into their laws, because it has to do a lot with subjectivity and defense, or with speaking in a harsh tone, or basically mixing certain words in a sentence, directed at some group, whatever that group may be. Um, but in America, um, hate speech almost doesn't really exist. It doesn't really make sense in the American system. Um, but that also means that you can't outlaw racism. You can't outlaw sexism. You can't outlaw misogyny or misandry. You can't outlaw any other form of craziness that you might hear people say, um, whether rational or not. Um, if somebody's right, does that really mean it's correct? Or if somebody's correct, does it really mean it's right? Those little stupid circular arguments you can have. They're not stupid. They're actually great to have, but they're really futile when you go round in the circle so many times. Um, but it's people trying to apply political lens to every single part of their life, and I think while with the cost of living, I think that's more than warranted. I think a lot of people haven't focused on that enough. Um, but I think that applying it to all sorts of social or cultural or just in your own individual life, little things, your day-to-day life from second to second. I think that's an awful way to live, and I think it really puts a lot of stress on people. Okay, that was a bit long-winded. Um, but this, I think I'm doing well with the connections here. Um, that gets me into kind of a lot of the places where people do apply politics to everything is social media. And the next thing I have down there is the sociopathy of social media. Um, we have a culture that basically rewards every single form of narcissism in sociopathy. People who, try to engage in these semi-mutualistic, symbiotic relationships online with other creators or with a certain type of content that they react to or make bombastic comments in response to. Um, I think I I noticed the trends in social media a while ago, but I think that I didn't really notice what umbrella it fell under until there was some article I saw. I can't remember who it was by, but it was talking about all these behaviors on social media, and it might have been Vanity Fair or something like that. But it was talking about how we're in the age of the sociopath. Um, People chalking relationships off to little minor details, cutting people off, cancel culture. I understand a bunch of people have done that maybe with maybe you had a bad upbringing. You did that to a parent, an aunt, an uncle, aunt. I normally say aunt. That's weird to me. Doing that, or maybe you had to do something that you felt in order you needed to survive because of that upbringing. But now people are doing it to protect their peace. People are taking all these great leaps to protect their peace or to live virtuously um, in a way that really feeds off of other people. Um, in abuses social relationships or tries to act kind of parasocially around people. Just going along so that you can fit in. But not fit in as in, you're trying to not be weird or awkward, which a lot of people do struggle with. Um, but it's really not being yourself, engaging in a bunch of fake uh, mentalities, social relationships, engagements online, living for the crowd. It's really I think it eats away at us, and I think even though we're not the ones who create it online, you are affected by consuming it because then you hold a view of an increased view of contempt for other people. I think the rage machine that social media is. And there was also a guy that Michael Smerconish, had on his radio show. An Austrian physicist who, he's a physicist, but he still conducted his research in this. But he was talking about how socializing, the over socialization of us through social media or through the internet actually made us feel worse about our social dynamics. It turns out having a fewer close friends that maybe you don't see as often in a culture or in an ethnic group that people mostly share values with, that actually worked out pretty well. And it's when you go on your phone, onto social media, and you see what one of your friends may have, said, or you see what some other connection through them may have said, you are acting, or your brain might perceive it a bit as socializing. So then your brain, is tired and annoyed and doesn't want to see these people and thinks, oh, do all these people have these stupid opinions? Why aren't they all as smart as me? And it's exhausting, you know. Um, and I don't know. I guess this is where I'm being tested in my speech test today. This fourth thing on my bullet point. I don't think I'm doing it to the justice I think it deserves. But I don't think that matters because the fifth one is the people who see that and reject it and act in defiance of it. There will be few, but those are the people who will find genuine solace in their relationships, in themselves, and in the world. Um, it's almost like being somebody who doesn't take people at the surface, not being nuanced, um, hearing people out, um, not chalking people up, cutting them off routinely. Um, those are redeemable traits that when you find other people who oblige by those things in an age where it's almost like they're forgotten practices or a game that has been lost to time, you will find redemption. There won't be many. There'll be few and far in between. But when you find those people, it's it gets to the point that I was mentioning earlier, that you don't have to agree with everybody on something, or that the over politicization of everything. You will find that in those characteristics, just through being a human, they've come to much more rational conclusions of things, and not following one political ideology over another. Things like respecting people, things like maintaining relationships and being a good neighbor and a good stranger to people. Um, it's unbelievably rare, but it's something that when you even have one interaction where you get to exhibit something like that, you see the impact it has. And I think one way that you can test that is speak to a generation that had that be their normality. Um, I think I worked in a grocery store or in a market while I was in college and a bit after, and I realized that all the old people were just incredible at socializing. The way they breezed between each other, the way they viewed each other. Um, you know, specifically a lot of the ones who didn't use social media. It's like it was bread on warm. I got it mixed up. It's like it's butter on warm bread. The way they just glide between people, the way they effortlessly can reach a resolution and act when they need to. Um, it's really something if you pay attention to it. Okay, I think that's enough talking. I don't know if this is big enough for me to save. So we'll see. I hope you enjoyed listening to me. Uh, and if you didn't, tell me why. All right. I hope everybody's doing well on the subjects I spoke about. I think at the very least we all deserve or should strive for a peaceful life. Okay. Have a good one. Bye.